In the vast silent theater of space, most discoveries arrive quietly. They don't announce themselves with trumpet calls or cosmic fireworks, but rather with a faint pulse in the data, a strange reading, a slight deviation, a light that lingers too long in the wrong spectrum. That's how it began with 3I Atlas. At first glance, it was just another interstellar object, another visitor from beyond passing through, minding its own business. We've seen these before. Oumuamua in 2017, Boros in 2019. But this one was different. Bigger, faster, stranger. And when the James Webb Space Telescope, humanity's most powerful eye in the sky, turned its gaze toward this cosmic intruder, it saw something that defied every known principle of natural motion. It wasn't the object's size that shocked scientists, though it dwarfed every previous interstellar visitor. It wasn't even its speed, though. It traveled at over 130,000 miles per hour, fast enough to circle Earth 5 times in a minute. No, the real horror, the real cold, creeping fear, came from what Webb saw trailing behind it. A glow. Not random, not chaotic, but measured, focused, and directional. This wasn't the tail of a comet. This wasn't sunlight bouncing off ice and rock. This was something else entirely. A heat signature, a propulsion trail, exhaust. And that changed everything. Because if 3I Atlas is emitting thrust, then it's not just moving, it's navigating. And if it's navigating, if it's adjusting its course, then someone or something is flying it. To understand the magnitude of what we're facing, you need to step back, not just from the telescope, but from your understanding of how the cosmos works. Natural celestial objects don't behave like this. They don't appear from nowhere, travel faster than any spacecraft ever built, and coast through gravitational fields with the grace of an experienced pilot. But that's exactly what 3I Atlas has done. When it was first spotted, its trajectory was unlike anything astronomers had seen before. Not elliptical like comets or asteroids bound by our sun, but hyperbolic. A one-way ticket through our solar system. A visitor with no intention of staying. At least that's what we thought. Then came the size estimates. Not hundreds of feet like Oumuamua. Not even miles, but between 6 and 9 miles in diameter. That's the size of Manhattan. A moving island hurtling through space at speeds that laugh in the face of our physics. How do you accelerate something that big without it tearing itself apart? How do you keep it structurally intact across thousands of years and millions of light years? The answer is simple. You don't. Unless you're not bound by the limitations of nature. At those speeds and that scale, even minor deviations would shatter any natural object into fragments. But 3I Atlas isn't crumbling. It's stable, controlled. Its speed hasn't decreased through planetary encounters. It's increased. The object has coasted past massive gravitational fields without being pulled off course. In fact, it seems to be using them as if slings hotting itself around each planet with calculated precision. A maneuver we call a gravitational assist. That technique is used by NASA. But this object is doing it better than us with no propulsion that we can see until now. That's when the tail appeared. Not a natural outgassing of ice and dust like comets exhibit when approaching the sun. This wasn't vapor. It was hot directional energy. Something pushing the object forward or slowing it down. And that's when it hit the team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. This is not a comet. It's a vehicle. There's a truth hidden in the stars, written not in light, but in motion. And 3I Atlas is writing a story more precise, more haunting, and more deliberate than any natural object we've ever tracked. Let's talk about its path. When scientists at NASA and the European Southern Observatory charted its route through the solar system, what they found made the room go silent. The object wasn't just coasting through space. It was touring. First, it skimmed Mars, close enough for serious observation, but far enough to avoid being caught in gravitational snare. Then, it plotted a course toward Earth, not directly, but in a calculated arc that would bring it within observation range while hiding it behind the glare of the sun during closest approach. It was as if the object knew exactly how to use the cosmos itself as a cloak. After Earth, it veers toward Venus, then Jupiter. 4 planets perfectly aligned in a sequence that maximizes observational opportunities while minimizing human interference. Statistically, this kind of path is impossible. Astronomers ran simulations. They found that the chance of a natural object following this precise sequence at these speeds with this alignment is less than 0.005%. That's not nature, that's planning. And here's where it gets disturbing. The path seems optimized for planetary surveillance, not flybys, not collisions, surveillance. Imagine you're an alien civilization wanting to study a solar system without being seen. You'd want a path that gathers the most data with the least chance of detection. That's exactly what 3IE Atlas is doing. The object isn't drifting blindly. It's performing reconnaissance. And then came the worst realization of all, the time of its arrival. Scientists now estimate that 3.2 Atlas began its journey toward us nearly 8,000 years ago, right around the time human civilization began to rise. That's when we built the first cities, discovered agriculture, developed language, and if this object was dispatched, then it wasn't by accident. It was in response. 4 years, we've waited for the James Webb Space Telescope to do what no other telescope could. Looked deeper, farther, and clearer than ever before. But no one expected it to catch a moving machine in the act of flying across our solar system. Yet, that's exactly what happened. When Webb turned its infrared gaze toward 3I Atlas, the initial data looked strange. There was a glow, not a reflection, but a thermal emission. Something hot, something localized, something directed. Spectrographic analysis revealed that this wasn't gas venting from ice. It was a steady exhaust like the faint trail of an ion engine or a low-thrust propulsion system. It was symmetrical, sustained, and completely inconsistent with any known cometary behavior. NASA didn't announce this. Of course, they didn't. But internal memos leaked. Webb had observed heat pulses from a region on the object's rear end. Pulses that cycled every 19 seconds, each one leaving behind a measurable change in trajectory. This wasn't just propulsion. It was course correction, steering, and controlled thrust. But the most alarming detail came not from the energy, but from the material. Embedded within the glow were traces of superconductive elements. Materials that do not exist in nature, at least not in this form. Elements with electromagnetic profiles more commonly associated with artificial constructs than naturally formed minerals. And suddenly, the Webb team wasn't asking if this was alien. They were asking how long it had been watching us and what it might be hiding behind that glowing trail. For decades, scientists like Avi Loeb have warned that we may not be the ones doing the watching. That perhaps in all our cosmic curiosity, we've been watched far longer than we've dared to admit. And 3I Atlas may be the first undeniable proof of that. Its behavior isn't random. Its path isn't chaotic. Its emissions aren't natural. And now its acceleration isn't gravitational. Everything about this object screams design. From its materials to its timing to its evasive maneuvers, but what is even more haunting is its silence. There are no transmissions, no greetings, no obvious attempts at contact. It moves like a ghost through the night sky, visible only because we've become advanced enough to see it. As if its creators knew we'd be watching now. As if they sent it not to speak, but to test us, to study how we react, to map our response, to assess our threat. And perhaps most chilling of all, some experts now believe 3I Atlas might not be the only one. Because if Oumuamua was the scout, then 3I Atlas may be the sentinel, the probe that comes after the first message is received, the one that moves slower, sees deeper, and doesn't leave. As astronomers continued analyzing the propulsion-like glow trailing behind 3I Atlas, a new anomaly emerged. One that didn't just defy expectations, but violated the very foundations of Newtonian physics. Normally, any mass-emitting propulsion at such a velocity and scale should leave behind a measurable wake, a shift in momentum, a loss of kinetic energy, a thermodynamic cost. But 3I Atlas wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating slightly. Yes, But undeniably the thrust wasn't being used to brake or stabilize. It was pushing. And yet, despite that, the object maintained perfect structural cohesion, showing no wobble, no disintegration, and no thermal distortion from friction or reactionary force. Scientists at JPL and ESA attempted to simulate this phenomenon in supercomputers using every known propulsion model, from ion drives to nuclear pulses to antimatter engines. None matched. The only scenario that reproduced anything close to what James Webb observed involved a theoretical propulsion method known as vacuum field manipulation. A propulsion system that doesn't push against matter, but rather bends space-time itself behind the object, creating a pressure differential that allows it to slide forward like a bead of water on curved glass. A technology so advanced it only exists in physics journals and quantum lab fantasies. If this is what's powering 3I Atlas, then it's not just alien, it's post-Newtonian. The kind of machine that wouldn't just be decades ahead of us, but thousands of years. The kind of craft you don't build to visit a solar system. You build it to master it. As the mystery deepened, a team of cryptographers and astrophysicists from multiple observatories started analyzing the pulses of energy emitted from the rear of 3I Atlas. While most focused on trajectory and thermal footprint, one analyst noticed something buried deeper in the noise, a pattern. The pulses weren't just rhythmic. They were encoded. Each burst of exhaust wasn't identical. There were modulations, tiny shifts in timing, amplitude, and frequency, like binary whispers wrapped in fire. Using AI-assisted pattern recognition software originally designed for decoding fast radio bursts, the team ran the pulse data through over 10 million simulations. And that's when something terrifying surfaced. The exhaust trail wasn't just a propulsion system. It was a carrier signal, a broadcast embedded inside the active movement itself. Every pulse carried data, digital fingerprints composed of ratios, geometric harmonics, and non-random prime sequences. Not noise, not coincidence, but a deliberate signal. What chilled researchers the most was where the signal was pointed. Not toward Earth, not toward our satellites or our telescopes, but outward, directly into deep space, toward a region with no known stars or celestial bodies. Some believe it's a distress signal. Others think it's a log, a stream of data reporting back to its origin point. But there's a more unsettling theory circulating in classified channels. It's a beacon. Not a message asking for help, but an activation code, a knock, a coded invitation to something or someone on the other side of the void. While attention remained focused on the skies, strange things began happening much closer to home. Around the world, magnetic anomaly detectors, usually quiet unless registering solar storms or seismic activity, began to light up. Not in a chaotic surge, but in synchrony. From Iceland to Antarctica, Siberia to Chile, ultra-low frequency signals began pulsing through Earth's crust. Not strong enough to cause damage, but precise enough to alarm researchers. The frequency identical to the pattern embedded in the propulsion exhaust of 3I Atlas. What followed was even more bizarre. Migratory patterns in birds and marine mammals shifted. Synchronized deviations across entire continents.